and you just leave that. It's so horrible. A lot of their war accounts you can read about, the veterans, combat veterans experience.
And when you disassociate, that's when they're able to fracture someone and create.
Yes,
correct?
you basically cause disassociation. That mind is left. You're left late in the human mind that you can work with. It's called the subconscious. I want to say Kathy O'Brien described it this way, but program for a minute so that you can plant a file where it can't see it and it doesn't even know it's there. And the human biocomputer and trauma-based mind control is human bioprogramming. Answered your question.
Yeah, so this happens, you've got families that are doing this to their children, grandparents, why were they doing that? What were they trying to get out of having you fracture? And explain like different parts, how those work.
Yeah. So, if you are being satanically, ritually abused, for example, you may be being abused in order to be involved continually with, or you might have a part created to carry on a network of individuals. If you are a CIA, your files are created for whatever it is you to be used for. My heart would stop. I was also programmed to kill myself with a handgun, and I had to deal with that programming. My uncle did. You're programmed. One of the reasons the CIA likes these kids from these satanic families that are being abused, involved with getting rid. And so we would even use the same ritual for the one I just described to you at the church in Nampa, Idaho. We use the same ritual to get rid of people. Experience I had in Haley, Idaho. It's very similar, and you learn how to play a lot programmed. Those files were created in my mind for getting rid of people, for making child pornography. I was made to be in that very heavily as a child. I was programmed.
This is from the podcast.
So if you're in one part, it's like a completely different person that's not aware of the other parts.
Is this still?
That is true for the most part.
Is it
But what is
echoing now?
interesting is
No.
you'll find clues in different memories that'll cause
We
you
Are the
to
People,
remember
Utah.
something in a completely different memory.
This channel, We Are the People,
And so
Utah.
for me, it almost feels like those parts at times did get intermingled a
Let me
little
turn
bit.
this off. This channel, We Are the People, Utah. They have a lot of stories about dysfunctions within the church and the bad things that the church does. To put it to the point, I grew up in the church. My mother started going when I was 3 years old, but I was in the Houston area. We only had one stake. As young as I can remember anything about the ward being a ward or any kind of church organization, the stake had just split into an east stake. So we were in the Pasadena, Clear Lake, Seabrook area near Nassau Bay and the Johnson Space Center on that side of Pasadena. Pasadena is where all this refining goes on, close to town. At the, not so much refining, there are some small ones, but it's mostly tanks everywhere and some early refining. Or maybe it's later refining. I don't know anything about refining. But in my wards growing up, I remember characters. There were people that, there was this family that had a sailboat, and I remember they invited us sailing. And it turned out the husband had a crush on my mother. And my dad wasn't very happy about it. And this guy was pretty aggressive. He was a big guy. He was an international chef. And I remember thinking, wow, how do you become an international chef? And I'm going to tell you some of my own experiences with the church and the type of people that ran in crowds. And I did run into a woman that I dated right before my mission. We made out, but we never did the nasty, as they say, because I was leaving for my mission, and you're not supposed to do that right before your mission. And so I was just months away, like 2 months away. So, and also I was attracted to this woman, but something that turned me off was that she, I didn't know what it was. Something just told me, my mind, my spirit just screamed, no, this one. And I've talked to her since then as an adult, say 20, 25 years later. We met up. We were in a city. I was up in Dallas, and she came up, and she was on some kind of conference, and it was on Facebook. And I contacted her, and she was like, oh, yeah. She was scared to hook up. Not hook up, but I just wanted to go sit at a bar, like at a sports bar and stuff, and talk about things, catch up. And she was like, oh, I don't know if I should. I don't know if I should. Oh, I don't know. Let me know. I'll let you know. I'll let you know. And I'm thinking, geez, what's the big deal? We either say yes or no, or like we're just going to meet up and catch up. And she'd be like, oh, yeah, that'd be so fun. And she kept being all weird about it. And then when I finally went she said, come by my hotel and get me, which is normal. I mean, she's just flew into town for business, like a training meeting or something. No, it was her sales meeting, national sales, and she won an award, she said. But it was like, I can't remember I think it was financial, some kind of financial service. But I went to get her in the hotel, and she goes, okay, come on up. And I was like, oh, no. I didn't really want to come up. I just wanted to go out and catch up at a sports bar. But I went up to her room, and we sat on this couch, and the conversations it was funny. She was the one steering the conversation towards some dirty things, And at the very end, she said, and I know this girl has gone through some abuse as well. As a child, she had the father and the mother and her sister, like all four of them, gross, And I remember when I was dating her, just for like the 2-month period, 2 or 3 months, she was actually going to be America's best, what is it called? The Fresh Face of America. Have you ever heard of that modeling? Like, I think Ashton Kutcher won that one time. Fresh Face of America, like the new look, or a rising model that looks different, doesn't fit the mold, and has a little bit of a different look, like a Keanu Reeves or yeah, she was like that. Not so much. I mean, she was kind of the big, what was her name? Wagner, that was a star, or was married to Robert Wagner. What was her name? Michelle Wagner. She reminds me of her, like buxom, big buxom, but she's kind of auburn red hair, but she looks almost more like a brunette. She has, she's not pale. But I felt weird because she was trying to trick me into having sex. But I don't know what shut me down. It was right there being offered. In fact, at one point, she made a really poor pun that said, she goes, it's just a poke, as they say, and somehow we were already talking about how dangerous it would be, like, to go out on a sales trip and meet up with somebody you knew when you dated after high school, and then they murder you. She said, my coworkers were telling me not to do it. And I'm thinking, this is giving me really bad vibes, whenever somebody's saying that they talk to their coworkers about it. That's just weird. And it gave them bad vibes. Why don't you just work it out to where you say, hey, I'm going to go meet up with a friend that I met after high school, and we're going to go out and have a drink. But I'll still be back, and I'll be back in the morning. Whatever you want to say. Even if maybe you're sharing a room. I doubt if she's sharing a room with anybody, if she got a hotel. Maybe she paid for her own hotel. I don't know if the company paid for everybody, or if she had somebody expecting her. But it was just kind of weird, and she was looking at me, and then I noticed her eyes were getting, her facial expressions and the way she would bob her head, things were getting a little fresher. And the more she turned it on, the more that she turned on the charm, the more turned off I got. I don't know. It doesn't happen to me much in life, but especially with a beautiful, beautiful woman. But yeah, she had her father and they had a polygamous relationship with their father as they were teenagers, her and her sister. Euphemistically, I don't know what you would call that, and their mother would watch and participate as well. So now, it's really weird. I just ran into her, and the way she turned that whole thing into a scary situation. And you might be a murderer. I'm going to give it time because it might be bad luck. And I mean, it's like, it's me you're talking to. What's wrong with you? Just say yes or no. You want to go ahead. All I said was, let's go to a sports bar and catch up. That's it. That's all I said. And she made it into, like when I came upstairs and we sat on it had like a 2-seater short couch. What do you call it? A love seat. But it's toward the end when she said, well, and like when we were talking about it, one cheating on the other one out of marriage, and then she says, well, she smiles at me. She goes, it's just a poke, I was like, okay, that's it now. That really a little much. But, more than just the poor puns and the weird vibe that she put off, the whole scene of being weirded out about it, and even talking to her coworkers about it, and spilling her guts on how she felt and how she didn't know, if she wanted to become a statistic and be murdered. And she's talking about me. We had a great relationship, and I was leaving for my mission, and I took off. I flew off to Argentina, and that was one where I don't think I've ever really had a bad ending unless it was the woman's fault, and that was only my 2 marriages. I'm just about friends, like on Facebook. I've got just about every woman I've ever been friends with or dated. They're all on Facebook. We can all talk to each other. I don't have any problems that way with women, and I've never had any problems meeting women, like to date or to have a relationship with. There are generally suitors, women that will, if I pursue one, I just pursue one, Sometimes I've found, doesn't matter really what you look like as so much as you have game and you just have confidence, and if it comes right down to it, you're just asking. And if they say no, just tell them, cool. Some guys try to get their way in without the woman knowing. That just doesn't happen. As far as to have an intimate relationship, you can't trick your way into it. That just makes it creepy. And that's what this woman was doing. But what I'm tying this to is that the way I met her was through another guy that I would suspect was like a J.R. Sweeney. J.R. Sweet been abused, been become a slave. Can let's watch some of this. Do I have the screen on?
Are
There we go.
intended to be separate individuals for different tasks.
You know, I mean, it kind of reminds me of like the Born Identity type.
Yeah, that movie was very similar in concept. I can remember watching that with my father when it first came out. Yeah, the spot where he remembered all of a sudden when he was supposed to whack that guy. My dad said, "Gosh, wouldn't that be a bummer deal?" Like, and I didn't even know how to take it. Oftentimes they'd try to talk to me like I could remember all these things, but you can't. You can't remember it because you're not supposed to.
So we've had different guests on who've been, you know, we've gone through LDS Church Satan or just ritual abuse even outside in other churches. But you were unique, and you started talking about this. I think we got sidetracked. But you were actually pulled into the CIA, and it's in the Monarch program. Would you share kind of at what age that happened, and what was the process to getting you in there, and how that's different than just normal satanic?
Or even before this, I'd like to understand the Monarch project a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are very good questions. So the satanic ritual abuse families, those families that are doing that, CIA is able to harness children from that and use them. Not all of them are selected. Call them the chosen or CIA kids. We talked about that. And those kids, you're selected based on your bloodline as well as by your ability to dissociate. And so I was selected by Alex Houston. He came out to my grandparents' house. I was in Nampa, Idaho. My grandfather knew lots of people out in the greater country and was always talking to different people. And we didn't think much of meeting Alex Houston, but Alex Houston did my test of dissociation and my younger brother's. And so I got involved with it. That was when I was 5 that I was selected. And it really amped up when I was 6. They have a trauma-based mind control programming facility in Disneyland down in Southern California. And it's a place that no one would ever think to even look.
Disneyland?
Yeah, Disneyland. It's a complete opposite, a reversal.
Stop it right there for a second. Does this remind anyone about who else was taken to Disneyland for the same thing, for the same purposes? You remember her name from Australia? It was Fiona Barnett. She said that she was brought to Disneyland. She was from Australia, and she was flown to the U.S., and her base, I believe, was in the L.A. area down by, where is it, Anaheim? Where Disney World is? But there are rides, and they would say, like, you on the carriage ride, you get on the carriage, and it moves a certain distance through the house that's part of the ride, and it stops, and you jump out. And then you go downstairs, and they have rooms down in there where they're doing actual mayhem is going on down there. There are lots of grapes down there. Grapes and habitual rituals down there. And it's the last place some children will see on earth down there. Not only children, I don't think, down there, but it's adults. This is only for once they recruit children, they will take them into the program, and then they'll take them into Disney World, and they'll get them to these secret chambers and rooms that go underneath in a tunnel system. And Fiona Barnett said it, and now this guy's saying it. This guy, I wonder how, from some of the references he's making in the Mormon church, he's talking about Eyring, who became a leader in the church. Eyring was around BYU. I think he was president of BYU when I was going there. And that's when but Eyring, I went to he wasn't president of BYU. I went and visited him this is the story that I was telling you. It's weird. This woman that I was telling the story about in the beginning, I met her through this guy that I met. How did I meet Bill? His name was Bill William. But I think it was at the same, there was a pool party, and it was for the young adults, not the 18 and, it was 18 and over, but yet you couldn't even be, you had to be, I think, 21. And then it was adults for young adults, like 21s to 30 somethings. And that's where some 35-year-olds could go in and get some really cool 21, 22, 23-year-old babes. But that's where I met William and this woman I'm talking about. Wow. But then she turned out to be in an abuse situation. And part of the thing that she said was kind of a network that in Houston, that like there were other people that do it. And I've heard this goes on at the church. And I've always questioned, could this have happened to me? Oh, but it turns out William, the last time I saw him, he was working at a porno shop when rewinding videos, and doing that kind of job. He was mopping floors. And I'm thinking, what was he doing? And he was married. Because what it was I went up when I had just gotten married. My wife's family was up near the Washington State area, and we got on. Wasn't Puget Sound? It was another lake with her brother had a boat, and her brother was friends with William, and then we already knew each other, so that we all met. So I asked him, "So what are you doing?" He goes, "I'm not doing much right now, just working at a porn shop, rewinding videos." I'm like, "What?" You don't hear that when you're Mormon. Mormons are basically just good people, so you don't expect somebody to say that. That just immediately makes them gross, He always had, and kind of the way he talks, he always, even though he was a big heterosexual guy, just kind of had that, wouldn't that be funny, kind of a really creepy tone to his voice. He didn't exactly talk like that. It was a little more refined, but had a little bit of that in it. Like he was trying to restrain himself from biting somebody's neck. But he worked at a church cannery in Utah. Yeah. He worked at a church cannery, and I went there one night with him to check it all out. He invited me out there, and we put some beans in the pressure cooker, and they had a forklift. The bastard, he lifted me up. I spread my elbows, and he lifted me up, and he took me too high up by the ceiling in the shop, and my shoulder was about to give out, and I was like, put me down, put me down, put me down, put me down. And he was laughing. At first, it was just stupid fun and games, but then I wonder if he was trying to program me and scare me and then invite me somewhere else, and then before you know it, they're trying to do bad things with you. But it was weird. I was at an age where I was already 19, though. Why would that happen? But he would be the type. But he's the one that introduced me to her. Or they already knew each other when I met them at the pool party. And I remember seeing her and thinking, oh my gosh, who gets to date her? She's fantastic. Wow. Really attractive. So the first time I met her was in a bathing suit, too. For a Mormon, that's an odd way to meet your girlfriend. So we dated for a few months. It was maybe 2 to 3, 4 months. The cool thing was when I was back at my neighborhood with all the kids these 4 guys that I grew up with, that were they weren't part of my clique. They were like the stoner crowd in my high school, like these 3 or 4 guys. They were hanging out at the 7-Eleven at the end of the parking lot where they usually hang out. And I came in to get gas with her, and then we went in the store and came out, and they were just looking at her and going, wow. And then they were looking at me, just like, how the hell do you get that, man? That was great. You always want to do that in front of your people you grew up with in high school. This gorgeous, obviously a model. I mean, but then the weirdness, her weirdness just turned me away. It was that strong. Let's get going again.
Satanism, you have a lot of opposites, a lot of reversals. Up is down, down is up, good is bad. And at Disneyland, good was bad and bad was good. And there's other parts to Disneyland you don't get to see, and things going on there that people don't know about. There's the average people that go there and they see the park, but they don't get to see what's happening off of the rides. Some of the rides even are made with triggers in them for programming specifically.
Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, one example is Alice in Wonderland. That's an easy one. There was the figure of Alice there at Disneyland, and she's by the Cheshire Cat. This scene is right after the flowers. The flowers garden was right there, the flowers that wanted to pull out the weed. And then there's Alice, the statue of her, and she would be used as a trigger. And often when I would go there on that ride, there would be a real girl there with Alice, and she'd be dressed as Alice. And
So what is the intent of the trigger? I mean, obviously they don't want you to like commit mass murder in the middle of Disneyland, but what would the end goal be of triggering a kid at Disneyland?
you're accessing those altars that we were talking about earlier, those different files in the mind. You're accessing those in order to open that file that was made during disassociation. You have to access it, and that access is made through a code, and it can be a phone, it can be one ring, it could be 2 rings. It just depends on what you want and what you decide to use as a trigger. It can be a name, a word, a noise, a sound.
What does this test look like in actuality?
Well, we were little kids. We were young. I was 5. My younger brother was 3. Maybe.
You know, this guy JR, he says one of his abusers was Eyring, who became the leader of the church, I believe. But I met Eyring. This guy, William, said, let's go meet my mission president. I want to go see him. And we went to the church office building, and we went up some stories. I think we went to like the 14th floor or whatever. 14th or whatever floor it was. And there was Eyring's office. And he had been William's, I can't remember where he went on his mission. It was somewhere in the U.S. And Eyring had been his mission president. And he was going by Eyring's office. And it was like just to say hello. And so Bill was just talking to him. And I remember thinking as a kid from Houston, this is my first time. This is my first time I'm sitting in the office with a general authority of the church, hanging out because my friend knows him. Like there was a cool factor in it. But turns out this guy was a Satanist. There are Satanists within the leadership of the church. This has been testified by so many people. There, Christy Allen, even Fiona Barnett, they mentioned the Mormon leader. She mentioned them. J.R. Swede is mentioning them. And there are some others that I've read or heard that are also saying that. And I've also seen in comments this person that I began to comment with on this one string I'll still remember from like 5 years ago. He said that someone who was a prominent singer, and I think it turned out to be Christy. What was her name? I said her name for Christy Allen. Do you remember the Allen sisters had a singing group that was big called the Allen Sisters? But you know, I think the Satan, Lucifer, there are some dark moments I can remember as a kid. I remember watching one of my leaders who was a NASA administrator. He was wearing a black cloak with a hood, driving the station wagon, taking us home from something. And I just remember, why is he wearing a black cloak and a hood? You know, and the weird thing is, his wife was one of my mother's best friends from church, and they had come from Pasadena, California, from Jack Parsons, Townsend Brown area, where the rockets were made with Jack Parsons when they were making the Moonchild with L. Ron Hubbard and the Redhead. This guy, and I'm talking about, he turned out to be an associate manager of the entire space shuttle program later on when I was an adult. But when I was a kid, like say 4 or 5 years old, the age that J.R. Sweet's talking, this guy that I'm talking about, he was, his name was Cole L.T.A.S. And he started out as a solid fuel engineer specializing in rocketry. Now, if I met him when he had moved to Houston in, let's say, somewhere around the mid-60s, like 66 or so. That means this guy that I grew up with in my church, I mean, I've spent the night over his house. I remember talking to him when he was sitting in his recliner, asking him how rockets flew through space if there was no atmosphere, when I was like 7. Because at first I asked his son, and his son was like, well, go ask my dad. So these are the kind of people I grew up with that were in my ward as a LDS person down there. But I remember him. I have a flashback of him. I remember getting out of the station wagon and seeing him go around toward the tailgate. And he was wearing a gown with a hood or a cloak, like you would see if you went to a graduation. But it had a hood on it and everything. And it's nighttime. And now I'm worried because I'm thinking there might be some other, what if I saw something? I'll tell you, I did have a demonic attack when I was in Idaho. We met these girls at the mall playing an arcade game, and they gave us a ride home. They were driving, we had walked. And the girl goes, you want to see a house where the Satan worshipers go? The cult around here? And me and my friend Jeff, we were like, yeah. So we go drive by there, and we drove around the house. And when we drove in the back, it was like 10:30 at night. There were these dead birds on the grass. And the driver girl, she's like, ooh, dead birds. And I was like, ooh, yeah. And then suddenly we had this rush. It was like a wind. It was the Mariah. It was like the wind. The evil wind just rushed right through my body. I felt it. Ooh, I didn't make any noises like that, but it just shook me. It was just like, it's like literally the wind going right through your chest, your whole body, and you just feel it going. Suddenly the girl, I was in the back seat with her friend, and my friend Jeff was in the front seat with her. This was an older car and had bench seat front and back. These were the cool cars to make out in on a double date, couple in front, couple in back. We were in one of those cars, and she just took off, and she started heading up this alleyway, and there was some ice on the ground still, and the tires were spinning, and she gets up to the top and turns left and headed. We went down to the Snake River, the dam, and they had dried it out so that we could crawl down on the riverbed and sit on rocks. And we went down, and I asked her, I said, did you feel that? And she goes, fuck yeah, I felt that. She's like, because she took off right when I felt that wind go through me. And the next day, Jeff and I decided to go walk. It was in our neighborhood, but it was about 8 or 9 blocks away. Maybe more. It was like almost 13, 14 blocks away. So we took off walking one morning. It was more than like 30, 40 minutes to get over there. And we're walking past this house, and we went up the alley, and the dead birds were gone. And we went around the front, and this man was coming out of the door. This was in Idaho Falls, Idaho. And it was a black man, which is rare. You talk about a minority in Idaho Falls, Idaho. It might be completely different today. But this was back in the, not too long ago. And it was in 84 or so. 83, 84. And he just looked at us, and he had like a clergy collar, with the white square, and he had a hat on. And the way he stared at us, he had these round, thick glasses. And he stopped, and he had his keys in his hand. And he was locking the front door, and he looked at us, and he stared. And I just had this weird feeling. So now I've been stared down by this preacher from that church. So anyway, that night, my friends and I, we bought a 6-pack of beer, and we were going to each drink 2 beers. Idaho strength. What was that? What are they, like 3% per bottle? And suddenly I saw, we were driving his granddad's police truck, his pickup truck. And so it was Jeff and his cousin Bobby in the middle seat, and I was on the right side. And suddenly I had a flash front, and I saw police cars and lights everywhere, and we crashed. And I said, I want out. Just let me out here on the sidewalk. I'll be fine. I'll walk out. We were only like 3 blocks from his granddad's house, and we were sleeping in the basement. So they let me out. I went down to the basement, and I was laying down. At first I saw they had some laundry on my cot, some pants and shirts that his grandmother had washed for me. And then so I put those down where my suitcase was, and I went to go in the bathroom in the hallway, and as soon as I flicked on the light, something was standing right there in the bathroom and depixelated right in front of me. It was like, and it was so fast that I barely saw it. I don't know if you've ever seen an effect like that on a TV movie, but it was like something it was on a CGI screen, and they turned off the CGI screen, and it was in the room 1 second, and then in the next it was gone. It got swallowed by the pixels, but it was some big type of, like a person standing there maybe, but it could have been the spirit that was possessing that basement at that time. That could have been attached to me by this minister at that house where the Satan cult was worshiping. I'm thinking maybe it had nothing to do with him, but that night I got attacked by a demon that came in through the window, the basement window, and it was swirling in the room, and it got bigger and bigger, and it got really dark. And it wasn't really like I saw it like a Disney movie, like there was this evil thing swirling around in my room. No, it was just, I looked to the window, and I had this feeling it was almost like that wind running through me. It rushed through me again, but I noticed the room just got darker. The moon was out in a full moon, but the room got dark. And then you could see, when you close your eyes, you can see, I don't know what it is, if you're looking at the back of your retina, the little nerve endings firing, and you see just all the moving dots in your back of your eyelids. Those were even moving. And it was, suddenly it pounced like on my chest. Felt like, I don't remember if it felt a pounce, but definitely came in and then was on my chest. And then I couldn't breathe, and I was just thinking, it was kind of like it cut off just took my breath away. I don't know if it can't go in your, physiologically turn off your nerves to your breathing, your autonomic nerve. But, so it had to actually be something from another dimension that had just pixelated out and then pixelated back in. Because when I saw that in the bathroom, and it was right in front of the mirror too, I thought, oh no, I'll go to the bathroom later and I can hold it. And I turned around, I turned the light off and went back to the bedroom. And that's when it got dark. When the room was swirling and I felt the weight on my chest, I looked up toward the basement window where the full moonlight was supposed to come in, and I could not even see the window. It was just that thick in the room. Until I remember my mother saying that at some point in my life, something like that may happen to me, and to say, Jesus Christ. And they can't stand to be around the presence of the Lord, not much less even his name, and they'll take off. And I did. So I said that, and it dissipated, and then it was over. Like it had never happened. So that was an experience I had when I was, I was 18. So that was kind of a testimony. You know that the other side is real, then God has to be real. I always wondered why would the devil or his minions, why would they want to attack people physically like that when all it would do was turn them towards God? So when I see stories like J.R. Sweet and Monarch people, I things go different ways. You can't say what influenced his life to be like what he had. I definitely had my people that I knew. Like I said, well, so William already knew Diana, but Diana grew up in the father diddling them, and then but evidently so did William. But he works at the store where they have cannery, they run grains. The store has huge farming operations. He's even been harvesting. I remember on Facebook, he was posting, he was driving a harvester. So he's done a lot of different things. Anything that has to do with food storage or the actual production of food in the church. And remember John Todd, a.k.a. Lance Collins, in the 70s, he was talking about getting money from Evelyn de Rothschild and paying the LDS Church, and that the LDS Church, those boys like to party. Remember? Has anybody heard the talks of John Todd? It's got the black and white picture of that guy. It looks identically like my first boss, named Collins, one of my first job at the bio lab in 91. So let's go back and hear this guy's story. Let's cut to the middle, see what he's talking about. The whole story was fascinating with different things that he did.
Babies were being slid down this thing and up above on a landing, and this is wrong. And it was another one of the guards of the detail, and he had snapped formed together. And then the CO, the commanding officer, I apologize, the commanding officer, I was so young he didn't want to give me a gun, a weapon, or anything, because he was pissed I was even there. My uncle got really mad about it, made him give me a weapon, but he wouldn't give me any ammo. And so they said that if anything happened, someone would bring me some. And so then I was taken out, and I was given a comm system. Somehow in that mountain, the comm system was able to work because it was thick. It was concrete, stone, such a thick structure in there. And I don't know how the comm system worked. Yeah, there must have been, I don't even want to contemplate that. But I was placed at a spot in a tunnel system. So there was a command center, and that's where the CO stayed. And he had this other guy with him, and they had all these security cameras they were working with and setting everybody up in there. And I was made to go out and be part of the guard detail. And I was given comm equipment and put at this door. There was a doorway, and it was a double door, and it was right here, and it was up a couple steps, and then over here there was going down. There was another tunnel going down, and it was really dark down there. And I was told, don't go down there. By this other kid, there was this other kid that took me out into the tunnel to my detail point, and he said, don't go in there. And this kid was really pissed at the CO that he didn't give me any ammo, because he said there was evil things in the mountain. There were things in there that were bad, and people had disappeared, and he did not think it was safe that I was in there with nothing. And I didn't know. I was like, oh, well, that's too bad. So he called the CO, tried to get me ammo, but he still wouldn't do it. Something called the slough down in there. I don't know if that's just a military term or if that's a term for an actual entity that something called the slough down in there. I don't know if that's just a military term or if that's a term for an actual entity that lives in there. I don't know. But there was something evil living in the mountain.
He's saying a
I
slough.
would later be told
Never
that
heard
the
of that.
doors to the mountain that we came in, the big steel doors, were there to hold in, not only hold out, but hold in. They were there to keep something in too. So, but we went down. He's positioned me at this doorway, and it smelled by the doorway. You could smell like chlorine. It smelled almost like a pool set up. And it was quiet for a while. He left, the kid who brought me out there, and he went to his point. He said if I needed anything, just call. So I stood there, and I guarded that point for a while. I don't know how long. Time passes, and when you're in that state of mind, you really just don't know, you know? And then I started to hear things. I could hear the water splashing and screaming. You could hear screaming. Women screaming, people yelling. I didn't know what was going on in there. And I just stood there and did my thing. And then the comms, the CO would call in every once in a while, see how you were doing, check in on everybody. And at one point, a voice came over the comms, and somebody was saying, we've got to kill all these people. We've got to do something. Do you see what they're doing in there? This is wrong. And it was another one of the guards of the detail, and he had snapped, and he couldn't accept. There was a part of him that was too strong, and it said, no, this is wrong. And he was trying to talk us all into going in there, in our doors that we were guarding, going into the ceremony and shooting everybody up. And so the CO, he cut him off. He didn't want him talking to everybody. And the CO told me, he said, you're closest. You're right across from him. He's right across ceremony. I want you to get there now. Get there, get there. And so I did what I was told. And I grabbed the door and I opened it and I went in. And oh boy, what hit me when I went in there, it was just, yeah, it was bad. I ran through it as fast as humanly possible, but what it was a bunch of pools. I knew there were pools to my right, pools to my left, and there was blood. There was blood all over the floors. And I looked over, and it was just horrible what I saw. And they were eating infants. That's what I saw, was someone eating a child, a baby.
Man.
And it was just like parts of it. And I was
Lost my
oh
appetite.
God, it was difficult. It's difficult to even describe because you're in a completely different personality. And I ran through and I went through the door and I closed the door. And I couldn't process what I'd seen. It's like, holy cow. And somebody said something in front of me. And I looked, and in the dark, there was this guy, and he walked out, and he thought I'd come to help him. He said, did you see what they're doing in there? We've got to do something about this. And I didn't know what to say. There I was. I was a distraction. That's what the CO was using me for, was as a distraction, to slow this guy down. And other personnel were coming. And so I stood there, and I was like,
The actual
what is
scene
going
he's
on?
describing.
And he talked to me for just a couple seconds or a minute, and then we could hear the other people coming down the corridor really fast. They were running. And at that moment, that guy that I was there to distract, he realized what had happened, that I was a distraction. Didn't have a helmet on. And he took his, I was so close to him. We were very close. And he took his subgun and he just smashed my head in with it. He just went up and he came down. And he hit me so hard that it knocked me down. It knocked me out. And it literally knocked my spirit from my body. That's how hard he hit me. I can remember my body falling and my spirit being thrown back and standing and seeing these guys come out of nowhere in the corridor and just grab this guy. And it was all so chaotic and just madness. I didn't know what to do. I was in a whole different form at that point. My body was knocked out. And I left. I went through the doors back into the ceremony. I don't know why I went there, but I did. I went right back in. And I think a part of me was curious because it had to see what was going on in there because it was so bad. I feel like I had to see it and it had to be witnessed. And so I went in and I saw, and there were pools. There were pools at the end that I'd come in, and the room was longer. And there were various pools in there.
Do you know what they say in general? If people are telling the truth, they tend to look straight ahead and to the left.
And they were all red, they were all filled with blood, and there was blood everywhere. And there were all these men. They were all men. And they were in these pools. And I followed this down, and they were eating something. And they were eating babies that were freshly born. They were being born at that moment. And so I moved up, and there was a slide at the very end. And the babies were being slid down this thing. And up above on a landing in this white room was all these beds and all these, quote, doctors. And there were, I don't know how many women up there giving birth. And they were giving birth, and the children were being sent down, and then they were being consumed alive. That's how evil people can be. I saw these things, and I had to leave. Even in spirit form, I couldn't bear it. I said, no, it was awful.
So he's out of body already having this experience, but what I'm wondering is, how many women are there having babies that they're continually coming into this room and going down a chute slide? Or was he standing there watch for hours and hours? Or was this over hours? But still, there'd have to be a lot of women in there. And they'd have to be being all impregnated by these men. The whole scene is disgusting. It's not only horror, but it's disgusting. Eating young ones like that, just born. That is sick. You know, no matter what your religion, even, let's say you even wanted to eat a human, why would you just go to some room set up under an amusement park in a pool mixed with bleach and chlorine, or where they're chemicals, and because it had to be cleaned and it's going on every day and it's raw, and it just, why be so horrific and disgusting? Like I said, I was just saying, put in a scenario that if you did even think that way, that it was okay, why would you be so unsanitary and absolutely disgusting? And they have to be addicted or have some type of perversion that takes them over, or they must be possessed. Some perversion takes them over and possesses them. That's just so nasty. But maybe he's telling the truth, but he's exaggerating this one part, because I can't imagine there are a shower of fetuses raining down a slide into a pool where there are men. But it seems he's in a spirit form. So, if that's what he's doing, he's probably having an experience on a spiritual level because it left his body when he got hit in the head. Okay, never mind.
And so I left, and I went back to find my body because I didn't want to get stuck out of it. and not find it. And so I went back to where it had been knocked out, went back through those doors, and they were gone. There was somebody there doing the guard detail, but my body was gone, and the other guys were gone. And so I didn't want to get lost. I had to go back through the ceremony again in order to get back to the way I knew to get back to the CO's operating station. And so I went through the ceremony again, but this time no one could see me, unlike the first time that I ran through there. Because when I ran through there, when the CO was telling me
He's invisible
some people were looking at me like, what is going on?
at a
This time I just
ceremony.
went through. And then I don't think anyone was at the station that I was at. And I looked down that tunnel. I didn't know where it led to. And I'd been told not to go down there, so I didn't. And I went back and I found my body. It was at the CO, with the CO, on a, what you'd call a table or a gurney. And I was just laying there, and my head was all smashed in. And I was like, oh, man, that looks like it hurts. And I was mad. I was really mad because my uncle had left me there. I don't know if I said what my uncle was doing while I was at this. He told me he was going to hang out at this thing, and so he could keep an eye on me, and I'd know he was there. Well, he told me right before I went into all this that he was going to Bohemian Grove. He had to go. I've got to run. Yeah, he was going to Bohemian Grove. And he said that Britney Spears was there and that he wanted to get in on working on Britney Spears. And so Britney Spears is a CIA trauma-based mind slave. That's why she acts like she has a multiple personality disorder, because she does.
And Bohemian Grove is another place
Amazing.
like Disneyland where some
Bohemian
of this
Grove.
happens.
Yeah.
When you were in that room, whether in spirit or in your fractured personality, did you notice anyone or recognize anyone as a person of influence?
I can't answer that. They were all Asian. I don't know who they were. They were all Asian, though, from an Asian country. I could tell that.
Such an extreme life.
Wow.
Someone started shooting. I could hear a gunshot. Well, first I heard the bullet. Went right over our heads. And then gunshot, another bullet, another gunshot. And I was like, oh, my God. And I turned around, and my poor little cousin, he was coming right behind me.
He also reports being in part of the most dangerous game hunting party as a victim with the Hilton sisters, with Paris and Nikki.
And he was just screaming and waving his hands, run, 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 he said. And so I turned around.
You know what surprised me about Paris Hilton when she was talking about her youth? She was held in a detention center for kids that were, we used to say delinquent, which means late, right? Late developers, maybe violent kids or drug users or just troublemakers. And you send them away to this, and it was in Orem, Utah, which is right there, the sister city of Provo, where Brigham Young University is. But it's also the site where Charlie Kirk was just shot. It used to be Utah Valley Community College, but now it's a university in itself. I forgot the name. Is it Utah Valley University? And that's where Charlie Kirk was just shot. But that's also where Paris Hilton went to school. That I think she said, I don't know if it wasn't school. No, it was like dorm school. That's what it was. She went to a school out there that was like a dorm school, but she had reports of people trying to abuse her, and they were terrible to the students there. It was very confining. They couldn't go out. They had early curfews and everything taken away from them. And you're thinking, wow, Paris Hilton in Utah, and then in Orem, huh? But then when you think about the only connection that I can think of with the hotel chain could have been through maybe the Marriotts, because the Marriotts are Mormon. The Hiltons tied through Mormonism could be through Satanism. And if they're an elite power family with satanic ties, they may have connections to get into the Utah game with the camps and their recruiting programs and the hunting parties that they have in Utah. So the Hiltons sent their daughters out to be hunted. It's part of the Monarch programming for them to be in fear and be hunted. But they also witness, I think it's in this story where he says the guy that was hunting them that he knew from church was the sheriff, I think. He was pissed off that they were running with this other girl that was an orphan, and he just shot her. But the reason why I'm making this video, folks, is because my life, I went to church in Houston as I had married parents, but at church it was only my mom because my dad refused to go to Mormon church. So I didn't have a priesthood member in my household, until I became a deacon myself, or not even the upper priesthood until I became 18 and a half. But I'm lucky. I did not have this type of abuse on me or anything, people around me, but I think I saw it. At least I saw the man in a robe with the hoodie on. It was a NASA administrator. I saw, looking back, different things, and how I wound up at parties where I met the girl that had been essayed by her father, who knew William, who ended up working for the church, who introduced me to Iring, who's one of the people that J.R. Sweet mentions was eating the nasty.
And we just had to run. I didn't stop and help the girls. But that was the first time that I met the Hilton girls, was in the game.
Was there something with their dogs you mentioned?
Yeah, he had dogs.
Oh, I thought it was part of the game.
Will you tell us more about what happened with this?
Yeah, so we ran. I don't know what happened to the Hilton girls, because I'll tell you what happened to us, but I don't know what happened to them. So we ran.
Usually the elite families will put their daughters or sons in these games just to scare the hell out of them. And they do witness other children get murdered. But they're not told that they're going to be safe. So they think they're going to die, but it's actually part of their training.
My cousin and I about Satan as the great deceiver. Satan is the great deceiver. And these people work through deceit. And the Bible talks about false prophets. I can't think of anything closer to home than when I think of Hinckley as the false prophet and Monson as the false prophet. Those were very bad people, and they were worshiping Satan. And I don't understand the relationship between Lucifer and Satan, because there's different views there. But in my mind,
in my life, I met Monson. I've shook it. I met him in a Blockbuster movie store. I was in Sandy or West Jordan at a Blockbuster, and my friend goes, "Look, it's Elder Monson." We wanted to shake his hand. But I told you, I met Iring when William took me to Iring's office at the church office building to meet him. But that was in the late 80s. So, you know how you have how many degrees of knowing people that they know? But I know so many people that he's talking about in this story. And I know I had a demonic attack in Idaho Falls, it's pretty Mormon. Just outside of Utah. It's just like Utah. There's probably more Mormons per capita in Idaho Falls than Salt Lake City. But I can tell you, church is creepy. John Todd said it was part of the Illuminati. They paid money. Rothschild would send them money, and that's how the church got so big. They make it sound like they just got it through faithful tithe members that paid their tithing, and that's not true. But President Hinckley was an evil man and a Satanist, and I absolutely believe that. I've heard so many people say that. I've this guy J.R. Sweet. I didn't even know about this guy until I heard Kurt Metzger, the Derp, talk about him, and I looked him up. But as being raised a Mormon in Houston, I think I was lucky because even though I was out in the field, as the Mormons call it, when you're outside of Utah, you're out in the field, like you're on the safari land. That's where I went to church, was in Houston, not in Utah. Maybe I was spared because I did not come from some town in Utah where they could have diddled me and performed rituals and put me in some Monarch program, and I would have wound up at Disney. But I'm shocked at the ties between the CIA, the LDS Church, and on several things. You know, the new S4 or Area 51 is actually in Tooele, Utah. There are a lot more things going underground, I've heard, with the aliens, like extraterrestrial beings and flying technologies in Tooele, Utah, and not Area 51. Area 51 is where I think the astronauts go when they want to come back from space, and they've actually been on the ground acting in zero-G planes and everything. They take off from some unknown base, like these astronauts that are just now coming back. Let's see, when the capsule drops, it's going to land in the ocean, and they could have just put it in the back of a cargo plane and pushed it out at 70,000 feet. Nobody can see it, and then the TV goes, "Where's the capsule? It just came burning up through in the atmosphere. There it is. There it is. Are they still alive? There are the parachutes." They drop in the ocean. They have to keep a distance from the capsule because it's sizzling while they show it. I like how they always go up when they touch it, like it's going to be so hot, it's going to be boiling the water around it. When they actually can take the whole show and just put it in the back of a transport plane and just kick it out down the conveyor belt until it drops out into the sky and parachutes back down to Earth. I think that's what they do. And the space shuttle itself, it is very deniable. Those could have been jet engines on either side of the rudder stabilizer. And it was, I believe it was a Gulfstream, modified Gulfstream with Gulfstream engines. So that's about it for tonight. Let's have prayer, folks. Watch the J.R. Sweet story. And if you know a Mormon that grew up out in the field, ask them if they remember any satanic people that were in their wards or did things that maybe their family took them to an event and they don't remember. Yeah, I didn't like it in general when my family took my mom took me to events where I met new kids. Sometimes there were cool kids that you really wanted to hang out with, but those kids could have been the kids that were in a program. I feel like I'm forgetting more that I could talk about if I just sat down and thought, or if the memories would come to me. It's not like I had any one memory, but I keep having that flashback of the NASA administrator when I was spending the night with his son, and I'm getting out of the station wagon on the driver's side with the door open, and I'm looking back toward the tail bumper, and he's opened the driver's door and gotten out, and he's walking towards the back of the car. But he's wearing a long black cloak, because I can see his skinny ankles with his church wingtips going around the car. He was an engineer with the pocket protector in the wingtip shoes type guy. But the fact that he came from Pasadena, California, and he went to Caltech and he studied solid rocket fuel at the school that Jack Parsons started, who was a Satanist with L. Ron Hubbard. And he moved to Houston. And he had, just tick, 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 all the boxes. So now I'm trying to think. That brother and sister and their family and their kids. I know his oldest sister worked for the church office building in marketing. And she lost her testimony and quit going to church because the leaders of the church were disgusting. I think she found out some things. She just said they were disgusting and they were just pigs. And she would have to deal with them taking portraits and putting pictures on their books, and they were so picky and would get all hot and snotty about it and vain that it was such a turnoff. But I know there are people that have been SA'd by their bishops, by their home teachers, and that's terrible. I know a story about another friend of mine in a ward when we lived in another state. That happened to him when he was a teenager. And it's, I just couldn't imagine. I had such a good childhood. You know, I just grew up doing those normal things. You know, I played golf. Yeah, we had a big creek by where we lived, so we always had lots of Tom Sawyer type adventures as kids, going out in the woods and spending the entire day through adventures you could write books about. And fun. So, prayer, let's have a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful for our lives and those things that we have. Bless us to be in tune with our spirits and recognize maybe when people are bad influences in our lives or trying to leech onto us or drive us or manipulate us, cast those people out, away, and we don't have to. If we don't feel comfortable, we need to speak up or do not do the things that these others influencers might have us do. If we don't feel that it would be a good idea, let's not do it. Follow our instincts, but the instincts are really your spirit guiding you. And we are learning that, Father. And bless all those who are listening tonight and made it this far down to the end of the video. And bless them with their needs, which are righteous. And will do good for them, help them grow. And this we pray. Amen. All right. Always have some stories in a prayer. Don't tease or even mess with cults or anything or Satan, or even like I did with those girls. Just driving by the house where they practiced, we got hit by the evil wind, and then I think maybe cursed by that professor. I mean their pastor, the evil satanic cult pastor. Got stared at. Maybe he cast a spell. I never have believed in them, but if that was the reason I was attacked that night, maybe something followed me from somewhere. Just don't even mess. All right. Come back and see us tomorrow night. Hopefully we'll put on another show. I keep trying to do this nightly. And over and out. Bye.